Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. It's our goal here to create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians by helping these two professions better understand each other with the ultimate goal of making customers happy in the homes they live in and the buildings they work in. Eric and I are joined in this episode by Silas Hoeppner. He's a real passionate advocate for building performance and HVAC design, and we get a chance to explore his unconventional career journey in the industry. He started out in a family insulation business, like a lot of other folks we know in the building performance business, but he got into various roles in energy rating, HVAC consulting, contracting, and he finally found his niche working at modern HVAC, heating and air conditioning in Ohio. He talks about some of the challenges he faced, which are challenges a lot of us have faced in terms of both technical, career challenges, and personal challenges. And it's really great where he offers his insights, focusing on how he blends his technical know-how with relatable communication. Communication is so important. I got to say, in my career, that's been the most intrinsic thing I've paid attention to. Silas shares some personal lessons about confidence, mental health, and humor, and he cracks a few jokes along the way. So why don't we get into this conversation with Silas Hoeppner and talk about building performance with purpose, Silas Hoeppner's journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Eric Kaiser here, Mr. Bill Spohn over there, fresh off of a vacation. He's back, he's rested, he's ready to go. He's weeded through all of his emails.
No, I haven't.
Okay, maybe not quite, but he's working on it. And anyways, special guest with us today, all the way from Des Moines, Iowa, Mr. Silas Hoeppner. Silas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here. It's really cool to have an opportunity to talk to folks like you guys that I admire.
Thank you. We admire a lot of people's journeys, including yours. And we also want to provide for our guests the fact that this will be the first guest from Des Moines. And we want to orient them geographically as to where that is.
It's squarely in the center of the universe where all the things happen. So we're in climate zone 5, right in the middle, central Iowa. I'm actually in Ankeny, which is a suburb just north of Des Moines.
The university's near there?
So Iowa State University up in Ames, which is about 20 or 30 miles north of us. And then Iowa City, a couple hours to the east, is where University of Iowa is located.
I was out in Ankeny once, a guy named Tom Greiner, Professor Tom Greiner, with the extension. And a lot of his work in carbon monoxide measurements and things like that.
Yeah, they do some really cool stuff up there, building performance and other things.
So is that any of the cool stuff you do?
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to do a lot of cool stuff, and really by no design of my own. Everything has been by chance and accident and at other people's request, and I've taken advantage of those opportunities, I guess you might say. But yeah, a lot of that stuff.
I feel like that's how a lot of us got to where we're at today, is by chance and, oh, hey, that looks cool. I can do that.
For sure. So my folks own a very small insulation contracting company up in Spencer, Iowa, in the northwest corner of the state, where the wind is always blowing 100 miles an hour and it's always 10 degrees colder than anywhere else on the planet. And when I say very small, I mean Dad is probably in somebody's attic today insulating, and Mom is probably putting together some invoices. 1 or 2 employees throughout since I've been old enough to know and remember, but they've been in business doing that since 1977, D&T insulation. That's how I got interested in building performance, but it was not a direct route, let's say.
This started off here. I was in Iowa a couple months back, and I knew Silas was around there, and I got a hold of him. I said, hey, let's go have a beer. Let's get together, talk. And he started telling me all about this circuitous route to where he's at now. And I thought, hey, this is a pretty cool story. I think we should share this.
It's fun to tell this story, although like you kind of have to get a captive audience a little bit. Like I'm the guy at the neighborhood parties like, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, okay, get ready. And 17 minutes later, like those people are like sending messages out of their phone like, honey, please come save me from this guy. He's talking about blower doors and building science. I don't know what he's saying. And I couldn't be more bored. I'm scattering everybody. So growing up in Northwest Iowa, helping Dad a lot is what I did. And then I went off to school about 45 minutes south to a Division III university, NCAA Division III university called Buena Vista University, primarily because I wanted to continue playing football. If you were to ask me back then, hey, what do you want to do? What's your career path? What do you think? And I just wanted to play football and continue and learn some more stuff. And I didn't really take great advantage of that opportunity. I played football throughout the 4.5 years that I was there, and I graduated with a marketing degree and professional sales concentration. And from there, I was, now I have to figure out what to do and be an adult. And through that process, Dad was able to use some contacts that he had and get me an internship at a small spray foam insulation company, specialty company down in central Iowa. So I actually did an internship there one summer right before I graduated and was essentially a salesperson. But the company was small enough where you're kind of in operations, you're kind of in sales, you're kind of in marketing, you're kind of in training. Sometimes you're installing, and it depends on how good you did at selling. All of a sudden, we sold too many jobs. And that's how it got started. But through that process, I started to figure out that I'm not really so good at the selling stuff, and I'm really interested in how the buildings work. And it just started to grow from there, taking lots of opportunities as a young professional to stay late. I had a 1-bedroom, 600 square foot apartment to go to. So I was like, I'm going to stay at the office and read some articles. I put a lot of miles on at buildingscience.com and just spent as much time as I could reading stuff that was adjacent.
Did you ever have a situation where a problem in either like your office or your apartment or your house that led you to digging deeper or applying these things like on a personal basis?
Truthfully, it started out as just like not being real successful. I remember the first sales pitch that I gave to a home builder, and we were standing in one of his model homes, and he's like, so you said you got this cool spray foam insulation stuff. Tell me more about that. And I was like, reading right off of the brochure. Well, listen here. Your houses could be healthier, quieter, and more energy efficient, and that would be great for you. And he's like, okay, so why would I do that? I'm like, I was under the impression you heard me say that your homes would be healthier, quieter, and more energy efficient. And he's like, okay, how much does it cost? It's probably 3 to 5 times the price of the insulation package you're using now. And he's like, okay, well, I guess we're done here. I was like this naive kid selling spray foam. I don't understand. If it's better, why wouldn't you use it? So I learned a lot. Learned a lot from failing early on. But what I found was I started to believe that in order to sell a product like that, you had to have a great story to tell, reason that somebody would spend the extra money. And I got really into how buildings work, why air tightness is important, and all those things. And then I erroneously believed that the more technical knowledge that I can get about my product, the more likely I am to sell it to people. And there is a niche section of the marketplace that is like, wow, this guy just spent 47 minutes telling me verbatim all of the words in the technical data sheet for isonine spray foam. He must know his stuff. I better hire him. But it's not that big of a percentage. It is a niche for sure. So still not a lot of success with that. And early on, I got almost cynical about it. I don't get it. If people knew what I knew, they would do what I do. And that really never actually panned out, as it were.
So it sounds like a small niche. And niche is already small.
There was a big group of 9 or 10 of us. It was great.
That's almost a niche within a niche.
Oh, yeah. It's great. So then through that process, I got hooked in with a couple of guys that had just started doing home energy ratings in a meaningful number here in central Iowa, Bob and Tim. And those guys came to us and were like, hey, if you have clients that you want to believe that the proof is in the pudding and like the stuff that you're saying is true, like we've been working with other insulation companies and spray foam guys and helping like their clients to understand the value here. So they would come in and do some testing on existing houses and show like, oh, hey, you've got some deficiencies. And then we would offer some solutions. And assuming that all went well, then we would have them come back and retest things. And that was like a novel idea to me. I'd never even heard of that concept before. And naturally, the results were pretty good. We were fortunate that we had a pretty good team of guys, which at that time, this was back in like 2005, 6. So back in that time, spray foam was still the new deal, and it was pretty new and novel in Iowa, especially. So we started to get some traction with that. But what I found through that process is like these guys can come into the house, do all this cool testing, use all these cool tools, and find opportunities for improvement. But then if I'm the one trying to help, I've got this one really expensive tool in my belt. And I might not be able to help with that because I might have to have them like tear down half their house so that we can access what we need to access to be spraying foam. So one day I just said to Bob, I said, hey man, I think I'd be really interested in doing what you guys do. I have a lot of interest in that subject matter. I do a lot of reading. I can learn really fast. To this day, I remember him saying, and this is a total Bob thing to do. It's not that he necessarily believed this, but he wanted to convince me of this. He's like, listen, you don't want to do what we do over here. It's glorified data entry. You'd be so bored. You're just such a good sales guy. Like he was totally playing on my ego to be like, yeah, you don't want to come over here, because they weren't prepared to hire me or really think that I would fit well over there. So one day I'm sitting there. We had outsold our production coverage, me and a friend of mine, Matt, that was the operations guy. And we were spray foaming a metal building out on a golf course up in Ames. And this is how I recall it. It was like August 312th, and it was 140 degrees outside. And I'm miserable. We're up on lifts going up and down spraying foam in this building. And I get a phone call, and it's Bob. So I answered it, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? It's probably better than what I'm doing today. And he's like, am I to understand that you would have interest in coming to work for us? And I was like, you have no idea. I can be there in 10 minutes.
Get me off this lift.
Yeah, I'll make a 40-minute drive in 10 minutes happen right now. He's like, all right, let's get together on it. And so long story longer, I ended up going to work for his company, which was a traditional home energy rating company. And I remember on my first day to show up to work, I'm cruising in. I've got the butterflies. I've got the nerves. And I get a phone call, I don't know, probably a mile or two from the office. And Bob's like, hey, I need you to meet me at the Panera just up the street. And I'm like, I don't even know what I did. I got figured out how to not get hired on my first day of being hired. And he sat down, we had breakfast, and he said, so I just got word over the weekend that we got this contract with the utility, the local utility here, and they are doing a home performance with Energy Star project for a town in eastern Iowa called Palo. It's near Cedar Rapids, and Palo had just experienced a devastating flood where something like 295 out of the 300 and some odd homes in the town were affected in some way or another with flood damage. So Alliant Energy was the utility company, and they said, hey, we're going to step up and help folks here with subsidized free home performance Energy Star audits so that they can get things put back together the right way, make sure things are energy efficient, and look out for things like water damage and mold. So he's like, they had hired me to be more of like a sales and customer relationship guy and like glad hand the builders, make sure everybody's digging the program. And that shifted gears immediately to my first day is like, you're going to drive 3 days a week, 2 hours away, and learn all about this home energy audit process. And I got to ride with another who ended up becoming a really good friend of mine, Adam Welch, and he taught me the ropes of the in the field data gathering. And where it starts to get really interesting is I found out at that point that unlike most home energy raters, the company that I was working for had a really good understanding and tight relationship with the folks over at NCI. So I got in on, without really even knowing what a furnace was, how it worked, or anything, I got in on airflow and static pressure and tonnage and design and all these kinds of things that having a background in insulation was super helpful and helped me understand. But that was how I got into the real building performance side of stuff.
How did you feel when you started to make those connections? Did you feel like you'd found the Holy Grail, or did you feel like, man, this is a whole diversion or another mountain to climb?
No, I thought it was really exciting, although I've had almost since then perpetual imposter syndrome, because we immediately, and this is how it is in our marketplace, but we immediately became experts in this portion of HVAC that was, and I think continues to be, really underserved, which is folks who get the education in HVAC seem to get really strong. Here's how it works. Here's the mechanics. Here's the electronics. Here's how to repair it, install it, but they don't really get that front end on the design. How do we choose these components well? How do we size them out properly? What's the airflow? What's the static? And that's come a long way since those early days. And by the time I was at Synergy, it was probably in like 2008. So it was cool. We had this opportunity to really be experts in a very small part that makes a huge difference, but it was really intimidating at first. I remember the first house that Adam was like, hey, I want you to do the testing on this one. And I'd been watching him do his thing, and we go down in the basement, and I drilled all the holes in all the right places to test this furnace. and put the static pressure probe in. And I looked over at him in surprise. I'm like, it's 0. We don't have any pressure. And he's like, you have to turn it on first. I was like, oh man, talk about a mistake. I'm embarrassed because I've been trying really hard and I go to test my first system. I don't even have it on yet. It was pretty cool how through that program and then through the other processes, we were able to fold that in. And eventually where that all went to is that NCI and the company that I worked for partnered and worked with the investor-owned utilities in Iowa to develop an HVAC measurement program that was tied directly to customer rebates. And they called that program the HVAC SAVE, which stands for Heating System Verification. Anyway, the whole idea of it was essentially we need to make sure that we're setting up this equipment properly, that we have the right airflow, that we're taking static pressures, that we're getting the combustion, the gas pressures set properly, we're getting the charge set correctly, and then that the equipment actually delivers the BTUs and the rated efficiency that the manufacturer suggests. And at the time, in Iowa, the utilities were offering like a $2,000 rebate if you were selling a 95% gas furnace and a 16-SEER air conditioner. You could get some middle-of-the-road equipment back then that was in those categories. So as long as the testing came out above a percentage of the output that was expected, you could qualify for those rebates. And the program involved training and certification for the contractors. So we would run around the state and different locations and teach contractors how to use a manometer, teach them how to enter all the data into the software. And then my role there was to take them out into the field and take them to 3 or 4 houses of customers of theirs and show them, here's where you drill your holes, here's where you take the measurements, here's the kind of tools you need, and all those good things. And it was an interesting experience. As many people that liked it, I mean, we put manometers in the hands of hundreds of contractors that had never even heard of static pressure at that time. And to this day, there's still a lasting effect, even though that program is no longer. You'll still have people say, oh, remember back in the day in the SAVE program, we had to do all this stuff. But the funny thing is the guys are still taking static pressures. They're still installing bigger filter racks. They're doing all the stuff that came from that. It's just not a program anymore.
It's the best thing when a program sunsets, but it has lasting impact.
Yeah, I would agree.
That makes it worthwhile.
I remember some of the data, like they would gather, all the data would be put into the software program and it collected like the average static pressure in Iowa going in was like 0.88 or some ridiculous thing. And then after, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 years when they did another aggregate of the data, it was down in like the 0.5, 0.55 range, just from folks paying more attention to what they're doing and doing some of the things that can be done to reduce static pressure without going a whole home renovation. So in that regard, very successful.
So you're not still doing that. What's happening now?
Since then, I had an opportunity in the early 20-teens. All the municipalities in the Des Moines metro and really across Iowa started requiring HVAC design documentation and the ACA protocols in order to be pulling permits and getting certificate of occupancy. And I had done a limited amount of manual J and just some load calculations for our clients, our builder clients at the home energy rating company. But I didn't have a lot of experience with manual D or manual S. So one day, all of a sudden, our phone just started ringing off the hook. All these heating and cooling companies were calling and saying, yeah, it turns out my builder that works with you guys needs all these documents to pull a permit. And gosh, our manual J software is broken. Maybe you guys could help us. We're like, oh, yeah, that darn broken software problem. We hate it when that happens. So we had this kind of immediate market opportunity to start providing some HVAC design consulting pretty early on. And that was a big learning process for us because it went from 0 to 60 and all of a sudden everybody needed it. The cities didn't really know what they were looking at. The builders were just like, we've had these guys doing our heating and cooling for 20 years. I don't know what the big deal is now. Why do we have to have all this reports now? But what we found in Iowa was what I think we find in a lot of places. Equipment was being grossly oversized and duct systems were being under-designed, filters were too restrictive, and just the stuff didn't really all match. So lots of talk about buying high-efficiency equipment, not a lot of talk about making it work real well. Ironically, I've found through a lot of the exposure to folks online and then some of the forums, I'm finding that in Iowa, we have, generally speaking, really good construction practices with the house. It's not uncommon for me to go into a home built in the 70s or 80s that has 3 or 4 air changes per hour before anybody does anything. And so a lot of times the opportunity around here is to attack the HVAC system, get things right sized, and go that way. So that was all the long route of telling you that I've jumped over through my career from that HERS rating energy consulting side into the contracting side. So I had a large HVAC contracting company for our marketplace here who was doing a bunch of Energy Star homes, said, hey, could you teach me how to do this right soft, this manual J stuff? Because I got to have it now for all these houses. So I sold him a full day of, I'm going to sit in your office, bring 2 or 3 plans, and we're going to go through top to bottom of the process of this. And he paid me to do that. And about 6 hours in, he goes, so first, I have absolutely no interest in doing any of this. And next, what would it take for you to come over and do this for me? And I really undershot the vision there because I said like, oh, here, I think if we could come to some arrangement that looked like this, he's like, awesome, you start Monday. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And that's how that got started. And I was there. That's a company that did primarily new construction spec homes. I was there for almost 2 years and we did something like 800 Energy Star homes in that time. And my role there was did all the design, all of the Energy Star paperwork, all of the utility rebate paperwork for the builders, all the compliance things. And then after I did all that stuff, I had to go out in the field and do all the testing, balancing, gathering all the data to fill out the forms. And that's where I learned how to do some of the physical hands-on startup type stuff with HVAC. I was the guy who was fine-tuning the combustion gas pressures, dialing in the charge, and some of these other things. And a lot of those things I learned from making phone calls to people that I knew how to do it. I learned from watching stuff where I could, videos, reading things, and taking full advantage of anybody who was willing to help me learn those things. And I was there for almost 2 years, and I learned that that was enough of that type of work. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of late nights. And not a lot of glory. I was the guy everybody was like, oh, God, he's going to make us do the stuff again. And eventually I had 4 or 5 guys out in vans driving around to new construction neighborhoods. And we had devised a system where we would do everything through the cloud. They would do a bunch of the testing and call me before they left. Hey, here's the numbers I got. I'd pull up their information in the cloud. We'd look at all the pictures and I'd be like, hey, listen, you're at like 88% of your design output on that air conditioner. We got to figure out why a brand new air conditioner with the right airflow and the right this and the right that is only giving us 88% total BTU output. Help me out here. What are you seeing? Well, yeah, I had a little bit of trouble charging it. I couldn't. I'm like, okay, well, we need to get service out there, take a peek at it. And we would usually find that there are some things. It's really interesting, some of the crazy stuff that you find that you wouldn't expect on brand new equipment. But it was pretty interesting because our service department was essentially completely booked up with our new construction installation work. It really wasn't, hey, we've got a bunch of members. It was, we're going to go back and fix the problems.
Getting called out.
Yeah, that the annoying air balancing guy found. But it worked pretty well. We had a lot of good experience from that, considering the scale that we were on. Very, very few callbacks for comfort. In fact, I can only think of 2 in that whole time span where we had some comfort issues, and those were like we adjusted our way out of those things, not ripped out and reinstalled our way out of those things. So that was the eye-opening, see behind the curtain, see how the sausage is made part of the industry for me. And I took that information and promptly jumped back into home energy ratings and consulting. I was like, I need to take a break from this for a little while. So ended up back into another consulting company, and they happen to specialize in a lot of multifamily homes. So we got into a lot of 30 and 40 unit multifamily homes, buildings, and working with more commercial style GCs than residential home builders. And that was a whole new experience because those folks had never had to play the game with home energy ratings, Energy Star, Manual J. Like they didn't have to do any of that because it was usually all mechanical engineer, red stamp, how fast can we build it, and some programs in the state of Iowa at the time that a lot of those still exist to this day. Some of the low-income housing tax credit projects and others had some pretty stringent energy efficiency requirements that we were a pretty big part of, but it was tough. You'd get into the pre-con meetings with these folks and be like, listen, there's some things that we have to test and inspect along the way. And this developer and this builder, a big chunk of the funding on this project is tied to those things. And the state will literally withhold that funding if you don't hit these milestones. And, oh yeah, no, that's great. And we prepare all these documents like, hey, we have to test the kitchen range hood and it has to hit 100 CFM when we're done. So like, please don't put in a 6-inch that goes 300 feet. And then lo and behold, you'd show up and all the things that you talked about and that you provided documentation, like best practices on how to accomplish, just they weren't done. And then you're like, now how are you going to do it? How are you going to fix it?
Was there ever a point or any clients where you got involved in the design while it was still on paper?
Yeah, that happens sometimes. And interestingly, we got into a lot of that actually because the programs would require, because they were usually Energy Star and we were usually rating each individual apartment unit rather than the whole building, which is different than how they had been previously permitted in the past. So they would have all these mechanical engineers drawing up red stamp mechanical documents. And then the developer, the builder would come to us and say, well, hey, we have to have these manual J's done or whatever. And we have to have a manual D. And anyway, we've been told you guys could help us with that. And we were like, we absolutely can. We're really good at that. The problem is it's definitely going to be different than the documents you already have prepared. And they're like, well, why? What do you mean by that? I'm like, you've got a 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom unit on the middle floor in between two other units that has a cooling load of like 7,000 BTUs. And it looks here like, yep, he specified a 3-ton. So we're going to have some trouble with that. That doesn't qualify for Energy Star. It doesn't qualify for Energy Code if we're permitting all this stuff through residential. Like, you got some issues here. We're just a couple of yahoos in central Iowa doing home energy ratings. Like, they were like, well, I have an engineer here that says this is what we need to do. And I'm like, yeah, I've been to that one. We saw all the mold on the walls there. You can see the throw pattern of the air coming out of the registers because that's where the mold grows. You see some really terrifying stuff. I went not last year, but the year before to Building Science Summer Camp, and Coda did a really good presentation on multifamily homes. I gave him a standing ovation afterwards.
So it was you.
Yeah. He was telling my story. And then I realized like, oh, this isn't just my story. This happened everywhere. And interestingly enough, a lot of the stuff that I'm working on right now is 8, 9, 10-year-old multifamily buildings that are having major problems. And we just had a presentation in front of an entire group of communities, some senior living communities that are having problems all over the state of Iowa. And I know it's happening elsewhere too. So anyway, long story there is I was doing that work for 3 or 4 more years and made some really good contacts and met a friend of mine, Jake, who has an HVAC business. We were able to work together on a couple of projects, new construction projects that they were working on. And the company that I was working for was in the middle of shifting into where they were moving out of being a third-party consultant firm and into like, hey, we've got a sister company that does insulation and gutters and roofing and
Total home services.
Yeah, but nobody around here really had that mindset. It was always set up like, hey, these are the energy guys, these are the contractor guys, and we're trying not to mix that. And they came to me and they said, hey, we've been really happy with all the stuff that you're doing, and we think we have a great opportunity for you in this new company and the home performance stuff. How would you like to sell insulation? And I was like, have you not listened to anything I've been doing for the last 3.5 years? That is the very last thing that I want to do. And it's not to be snobby. It's not like I didn't find value or anything in that. And their insulation sales guys could make really good money. I was not any good at it. So it wasn't really my passion. I didn't have a lot of success in it. And I was just like, man, how can we be this far off of where we're at together in this relationship for you to come to me and ask me that? And about that time, my friend Jake was like, hey, we got this heating and cooling business over here. We really like the stuff that you're doing. I could see you being involved in like some sales and leadership over at our company. Would there ever be an opportunity to work together in that way? And I was like, sign me up. let's do this. Having seen the way that he operated his business with integrity, and it's a smaller company with some really good craftsmen on staff, and it was just felt like the right opportunity to take some of this whole building performance design over back into the HVAC contracting side, but in a little bit more craft experience than the new construction rat race that we were running before. And I found a home there. I've been there now. I've been that company, Modern Heating and Air Conditioning, longer than I've been at any other company in my entire career. I could very easily see it being a place to retire from. Jake has done an amazing job of creating an environment where people can thrive. He gives me a ton of freedom. In fact, I went to him earlier this year and said, I really enjoy a lot of this consulting work that I do. So I know that supporting our business and training our guys and doing some sales stuff in the HVAC side, that's my role here. But I would really love to expand a little bit. I can help 300 families a year in Des Moines, or I could help 1,500 families a year elsewhere by doing some of the other things that I have a talent for. And I was worried that he would be like, yeah, that's not going to work. And he goes, do you think we're holding you back here? I said, oh, no, not at all. I really love what I do here. I don't want to go anywhere. And he goes, I don't want to hold you back. He's like, any of that stuff that you can find and get, like speaking opportunities, consulting opportunities, he's like, I want you to go for it. He's like, I want to send you to these conferences that you're always talking about wanting to go to. I want to pay for it. You bring a lot of credibility to what we do. We love having you here as part of our team. And I almost broke out into tears. It was literally like, I don't think I could have written a story where the guy would be more supportive of what you're trying to do. So this is my opportunity to do a little sucking up and shout out to Jake in public. But yeah, so this is my opportunity this year. I'm going down to the 6th annual symposium this coming year. So I'm really excited about that, to meet even more of the people that I've gotten to meet online and to be able to learn a lot from those folks from getting to meet them and things. So
thinking back to Silas in 2007, 2009 frame, if you could go back in time and tell that Silas something, what would you tell that Silas?
Ironically, it would probably have very little to do with the nuts and bolts of building performance. It would have everything to do with, hey, have some confidence. You have the passion and you are willing to put in the effort to do the right things. And you're using the information that all these really smart people have put together, that game plan and all the building science stuff. Have confidence in the stuff that you're doing and just go and do it. Because I think I missed a lot of opportunities to continually grow, maybe even further than I have, just in being like, I could help in those areas, but there's a point at which I run out of expertise. And if I hit that point, it's going to be like, oh, he doesn't actually know anything. That's another thing. And I'm probably going to out-talk our coverage today on this, but I've made some strides in the last year or so in the mental health category, where you just learn some stuff about yourself and how to apply things. And then you hear from other people like, oh yeah, I struggle with that too. I know a big topic down at last year's symposium seemed to be like, everybody's like, yeah, I got ADHD too. Like, well, that's weird. We all went the same pathway to get where we are today. And getting a grip on some of those things and starting to take advantage of some professional help there has really reset my traction and my focus. And I wish I could go back and say like, hey, you should call a therapist and talk through some of these issues. And if I'd have done that a little bit more early on, who knows where we could be today. But it's never too late to go down that pathway and start to get some stuff figured out. So yeah, just having confidence and going for it, go do it. And if you make a couple of mistakes, it's not the end of the world. But if you never take the shot, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, sort of a deal.
And I think you mentioned before the imposter syndrome. I think that's something that is healthy to have some of that.
Yeah.
Because it keeps you checking things. But if it becomes a large chunk of your time worrying about that, then it's very distracting and debilitating and draining. Just takes your energy.
Yeah. So there was this period where I learned all this stuff, and all of a sudden I'm being asked to go to present at utility conferences for building training, contractor training stuff. And I started getting asked to do all these things in different locations. And I really enjoy this. I remember at one point I was sitting in a combustion training class, NCI combustion training class in Des Moines back in like 2013 or 14, and Rob Falk showed up. And I knew who Rob was because he had a relationship with the owners of the company that I was at early on. And he said, hey, we're getting into all this stuff out in LA, out in California, because there's a lot of regulation, a lot of rules out there, and we're having an opportunity to do some training. He's like, would you ever have any interest in going out there and teaching a class for us? And I remember my brain just absolutely lighting up with fireworks, like, oh my God, yes, I'd love to do that. And what came out of my mouth was, I got some young kids, and I don't know if flying out to California a couple times a week is really what I'm going to be able to do. And which was true. But I think it was also just that if I'm the guy that I can stand up in front of all these contractors, not from just my backyard, but across the country, and tell them how to do stuff, that there's stuff they know how to do that I don't know how to do. So how could I go tell them what to do? And I sometimes kick myself over that, although I do now looking back, I think it was probably the right choice at the time.
Sure. And it's not like that's the only door that you came across that you could open and go through. There's been other doors.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm very grateful to all those people. Throughout my career, I've had an opportunity to work at a lot of different companies and small companies. And I've been really fortunate with people that are willing to put up with some of the stuff that I haven't been great at and foster and encourage me in the areas that I am good at. I've been really fortunate. Let's just put it that way.
I've been asking all the questions here, Eric.
You're doing great, man. I'm just sitting over here having a great time listening to this again.
So it's your turn to be on vacation now, huh?
Eric fell asleep when I said HERS rating for the 40th time.
To me, it's a fascinating story, and I love some of your takeaways from it, and especially going back and saying, hey, maybe go get some help a little sooner, because I've struggled with the imposter syndrome over my career, big time. It's a real thing out there, and sometimes we let it get the best of us, and sometimes we get the best of it.
I enjoy doing this so much. I have such a passion for it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was I recently changed my title, because people always ask me, what do you do? And I changed it to airspace archaeologist. So I'm the self-proclaimed first and only world's airspace archaeologist, because I'm fairly confident I made it up. And the reason I did that is not to be like, I think there's a certain amount of like, oh, this guy thinks he's more important than he is when you do something like that. But in my day-to-day life, I do a really thorough job of filling a lot of my time with nonsense and humor. But what I noticed when I would go to work, this is really important stuff to me. So then I get in this super hyper focused, load calculation and oversized equipment. I'm talking to customers and they're just like, geez, settle down, bro. And I think that here in the last year or two, after going through some of these things and learning a little bit more about myself, like bringing some of that levity and some of that humor and that attitude to things that are really important. I mean, we deal in life safety, we deal in durability and people that have acute health issues and those sorts of things. And sometimes what they need is a little bit of, let's relax a little bit, let's take a deep breath. We're going to get to the bottom of the building. Let's focus on the people a little bit. So that's what that's all about. It's supposed to be humorous. I don't have a degree in archaeology.
We should make a degree in airspace archaeology. That sounds like fun.
Hey, yeah, I'm all for it. I will help develop that curriculum, and I will take full advantage of knowing that there's some imposter syndrome happening, but we'll make it happen. We'll issue certificates, the whole schmo. But I wanted to say that because I think that's part of this is like, be yourself in the process. And it's just in the last year or so, everything in my life is just sigh of relief. Here's a great example. Brian Orr asked me to be on the HVAC School podcast back during COVID. And that was when I had realized I started at an HVAC company. There were a bunch of craftsmen there. And I found out then that was my realization on the Dunning-Kruger scale of like, you don't know what you don't know. And I hit this wall of, I don't have this layer of confidence that I had before because I now know what I don't understand. And it really, my career fell flat. I mean, I was doing okay, but I didn't have aspirations to continue to grow at that point because I was just so concerned. And I remember Brian invited me on. I'm like, this is exactly the kind of stuff I want to do. I love what he's doing. He's doing all the stuff on the HVAC side that I find really cool about building performance. And then I panicked and I was like, oh my God, everybody's going to figure out that I'm a complete fraud. I'm going to say something stupid on his podcast. And I said, hey, I can't, I forgot, I bought the microphone and the whole thing. And then I reached out to him months later. I'm like, I think I'm ready now. And then I bailed on that too. He's probably like, this guy, this Iowan with all the corn sweat down there has got to his head. And now I'm kicking myself because since then, that whole segment of the industry is going exactly where I'm trying to go. And there's just so much stuff that I've been doing this airflow, static pressure, building performance, blower doors, blah, blah, blah for almost 20 years now. And all of a sudden, like with social media and everything, like it's starting to get cool. Like, hey, kid's dad is starting to get cool. It's just like nobody knows yet. They're like, yeah, right, Dad, we live with you. We know you're not cool. Like,
You were cool before cool was cool.
that's right. Yeah. And then they go play Fortnite and I make some embarrassing comment that their friends can hear. And like that whole argument goes out the window. But
You lost it.
so I look at that, like that's one of those things that I feel like that is a missed opportunity, and not going to some of the conferences because I was like, people are always shocked when I say like, I'm a really big introvert, and they're like, but you're in like sales and you do speaking in front of people. I'm like, yeah. And it comes with a heap of anxiety and terror, but I make myself do it. I try to get outside of my comfort zone. But there, about 2018, 2019, I hit this wall of just like, I don't know enough to be out there saying this stuff out loud. I'm just going to crawl in my box and do my little thing. So I'm trying to grow back out of that box at this point.
You dropped a pun here just a couple minutes ago on your name, Sigh of Relief.
Yeah, that's a good point. I am such a fan of that. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm always finding the real dad joke way to describe stuff, maybe on accident. But yeah, I want to embrace that. That ties in with the humor and the maybe don't take yourself so seriously and try to help people on the people level. The building stuff, I've been saying this recently and I struggle with it because it almost sounds conceited, but like I was at a consult the day before yesterday. It's a 9-year-old house. It's a couple $1 million property. It was in a home show and they're like, the last couple of years, our furnace just really doesn't keep us comfortable. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. And then she's like, well, we were gone on vacation once and it got down to like 48 degrees in our house. I'm like, oh, so it stopped working? She's like, well, no, it still works. It just doesn't keep the house warm anymore. And I'm like, did you add on? Did you like, what's the deal here? And we got to the bottom of it. I went out and looked at it, and this poor system, it's got 3 zones, no excess air strategy, oversized equipment. I mean, it's all the things. The duct system's under design. That poor blower just sounds like it wants to give up. And I got to talking to the gal while I was sitting there asking her questions. And I'm like, the hard part of this industry for me wasn't in necessarily learning how buildings work and how HVAC systems work. Like it's taken me a lot of time to get there, but it's not hard. The hard part is helping people who don't have 20 years of experience, homeowners and stakeholders, make good decisions using this information, and me communicating that to you so that you can use this information. Like early in my career, people would be like, wow, this is a really thorough 746-page report about the energy use in my house. Now what do I do? I'm like, well, it's starting on page 307. You can very clearly see that if you solve your static pressure problem, and they're just like, okay, awesome. And then nobody would do anything. I've really tried to flip the script a little bit, and let's start with what success looks like and ask those questions, because if they will literally tell you what they want, and then that's either realistic or it's not. And if you're just frank with them, like you just gave me a $100,000 scope of work and you told me your budget was $100 a month, like we're just not going to work. We need to figure out something here. And that's the other thing I think that I would tell young Silas, maybe on the more technical side, is like all the stuff is really important, but don't forget, like this is all for the people. This is for the people that live there.
There's a phrase, a quote from Robert Bean. I don't know if you know Robert, but you should.
I love Robert, yeah.
Heatinghelp.com. Designed for people, good buildings follow. That's his mantra.
Preach on that one. Holy cow.
Yeah. It's funny because doing this line of work, you come across so many smart people. And for a while there, I would really make a point to tell people like, building scientists are these people that do studies and write papers. I'm in building performance because I use the information those people created and learned, and I try to translate that and then use it in the field and at homes. And so like for a long time, I was this real stickler on nomenclature. And I think it is a big deal in our industry. We use a lot of terms market to market. Even different towns in Iowa will have a different name for a rim joist, a box sill, a band joist, or whatever it is. And they can all be correct, but like if you're not on the same page and you're talking about 2 different things in the building. So nomenclature is this big deal, but I got really hung up on people be like, yeah, I'm a building science expert. And you're like, you bought a blower door 2 weeks ago. That's not the same thing all the time. And we struggled with that a little bit in this marketplace when we had an influx of raters that popped up, and then the sales pitch was like, we're building experts. We can do a duct blaster. And your home energy rating price is $100 less for us. And the conclusion was, well, like those guys charge us less and they don't make us do anything. So that just got to be the struggle for me. And that's when I noticed that I really enjoy working on buildings that already exist and helping people correct issues that way. It's sad because a lot of those folks had no idea that they were getting some of the things that they were getting, but we're going to help them figure out how the best way to fix that stuff is now. And to the degree they want it fixed. These people have been in this house for 9 years with what I would consider to be a terrible system that has nothing in common with proper design or execution. And they've by and large been like not unhappy with it outside of like, there's a couple of rooms that heat and cool poorly, but the builder said that's normal. And it's like, okay, wow. But now it's to the point where it's a problem and they want to get it figured out. And we're going to help them walk through how much of that they want to actually tackle. So interestingly enough, he's an attorney, so he may have a different view and a different interest once we get a little data. But yeah, that's the deal.
As we wrap up things today, I did ask you this question, what would you tell the younger Silas? But what would you tell today's listener who has many more resources at their fingertips in terms of tools, techniques, online? What would you tell today's technician?
There are a lot of great resources today. Too many for me to name, like all these podcasts that are happening, all of the training opportunities, the conferences. I feel like if those things would have been available when I was younger, the trajectory, the speed with which that I was able to grasp some of these concepts would have been a lot faster. I think the biggest piece of advice that I'd provide is that I notice a lot of the folks that are just getting started are doing the same things that I did, which was really focusing on the ingredients of building performance. Oh, I have a blower door. I can blower door your house. Oh, I have software. I can do a manual J. And all those things are important, but I don't think they register really well with most builders, most homeowners. That's really not what they're actively going out to hear about. But when you can start talking to them about the things that matter to them, like comfort and performance and reducing callbacks and avoiding risk, and talking about it from an outcome standpoint more than a here's how we get there standpoint.
Yeah.
The sales part of things has always been really difficult, I think, in the trades because there's so many different opinions on the best way to do it. And I think some of that is like everybody has a little bit different way of perceiving and understanding those things. So you have to tailor your message to the audience in that way, rather than early in my career, I thought everybody wanted energy audits because they wanted a payback and to save so much money. And people would call and ask for an energy audit, and you'd go out and do your thing and say, yeah, you can save this much money. And they're like, what about Johnny's room though? What about Johnny's room? Well, it's always cold. Like, I didn't even ask that question because I was out there for an energy audit. Really focus on the people. And if you're learning all of the technical stuff, then learning how to apply it without telling people, here's how the sausage is made, just selling them a great pizza.
Right.
From my humble experience and opinion, I think that's the fastest way to get to being able to utilize all this cool stuff that we're learning in the industry.
So last question. What position did you play in football?
Okay, so this is longer than you're going to want. In high school, I played offensive line and tackle specifically. But I was 6'4" and 190 pounds, wet and wearing boots. But we just didn't have a lot of big guys. For Iowa, we were a relatively big school. We were 3 out of 4 class sizes. But I found that I was able to take out a lot of the aggression of being younger and being smaller and being picked on and being whatever. I discovered at a point that like, oh, you can do some pretty brutal stuff on a football field legally and nobody gets mad at you. In fact, they give you awards. So it was a really good way for me to get some stuff out, and I just fell in love with it. So being a taller, lighter offensive lineman, you could really get out and into the defender a lot faster than what they were used to from some of the other bigger guys. And that was my forte. But that ended up translating into like, I enjoyed playing defense more. So when you play football in Iowa, you play, if you're good, you play offense, defense, and special teams, and you never come off the field. And I really enjoyed playing defensive end. There was nothing more fun than being able to get to the quarterback in the backfield and maybe meet your buddy on the other end of the line back there and do a good old-fashioned high-low. Then when I went to college, they really wanted me to play offensive line, put some weight on me, and I really wanted to play defense. And I somehow convinced them to let me play defensive end there and had a lot of fun doing it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today from Des Moines, Iowa. It's been fascinating, and I think there's a lot of tidbits people can pull from this conversation to figure out their journey, which is important. That's part of what we like to do, I think, here. We talk about technology, but also about the journey because we want to make a difference for people.
Absolutely. I really appreciate what you guys do. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm just thrilled that we talked about so many cool things that I'm going to be a recurring guest. Like, it is just all really good.
I think we can go back into this story because I have a lot more questions for you.
Perfect. This will be the first ever 3-hour length building science podcast. So everybody's going to love it.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Silas.
We appreciate you sticking around till the end of the podcast and listening to the whole thing all the way through. If you're looking for tools or test instruments, sometimes we mention in the podcast, other times we don't, we forget. You can check out TruTech Tools, my company, TruTechTools.com, and you can use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. That stands for Heating, Ventilation, Air Conditioning, and Building Science, by the way, HVACBS. If you've not subscribed, please consider doing so and share. Share with other people any part of the podcast or any of the episodes that you think might have interest amongst your colleagues, friends, maybe even a couple enemies. Got a lot of great trade-related resources out there, and that includes the Misfits of HVAC, HVACR School, of course, HVAC Shop Talk, Stephen Reardon, HVAC Reefer Guy, Tool Pros, Service Business Mastery, Quality HVAC, HVAC Overtime, HVACR Videos, the HVAC Grapevine, HomeDiagnosis.tv, AC Service Tech, Measure Quick, and HVA Checks. Please take note. Go to the HVACRschool.com website. Take a look at events. That 6th annual symposium's coming up. We feel so strongly about it here at TruTech. We are the marquee sponsor of that event. It would be a great thing if you get a chance to attend. If you can't attend in person, look at the virtual options. Really, really inexpensive for a ton of learning. I really hope to see you there coming up next February at the HVAC School Symposium. In any case, take care, and we appreciate you listening to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Bye-bye.